hyperbole much. Retired Duke professor argues that Donald Trump is responsible for more deaths than Hitler, Stalin, and Mao. But this is Duke University, where innocent lacrosse players supposedly raped more women than Nazis, communists, and Maoists, and where the school was forced to pay $112 million because it falsified research, which only goes to show you that Duke is bad at history, law, and research, but still charges more than $50K a year for tuition. I'm Dr. Duke, not of Duke University. She's Katie, and this is The Dr. Duke Show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Dr. Duke Show, the only program that keeps you educated on the craziness impacting K-12 classrooms and college campuses around and around this world. It is a Trumpian kind of Thursday. It is Trump Thursday. So today we're going to be talking about President Trump's impact on higher education and how he's managed to drive leftist professors bat-blank crazy. And we kick off the crazy train with a Duke professor emeritus who claims Donald Trump may be responsible for more deaths than Hitler and Stalin and Mao. That would be about half of the population of America. And of course, it was CNN's reliable sources with Brian Stelter that gave the platform to this idiot professor who's also himself called Alan Francis. This is the one time in American history where you can correctly use this. Lighten up Francis, Alan Francis. He was on Brian Stelter's show. Brian Stelter is kind of like bad George Costanza. George Costanza, who's completely unfunny. And he said in his dramatic lead into reliable sources, "We've got to talk about Trump's instability." Then, claiming to bring in two psychiatrists with differing opinions, even though both adamantly attacked Donald Trump, we get to Professor Alan Francis, lighten up, who's listed on Duke's University website as Professor Emeritus of Psychiatric and Behavioral Sciences. And what did he say, Katie?
Well, you got to just listen in his own words.
Trump is as destructive a person in this century as Hitler, Stalin, and Mao were in the last century. He may be responsible for many more million deaths than they were.
And in true Brian Stelter and pretty much every CNN anchors, the way they do everything there, no rebuttal, no challenge, no question, no like, wait, hold on. You're saying Trump actually killed millions of people?
Many more millions, perhaps.
Yes, many
than
more.
Than Stalin, Mao, and Hitler.
How can just any, I guess, again, 2019, this is how we do things. If you are supposed to be woke and progressive, then we don't challenge you or question you or say anything. We just let roll tape. Roll tape is what we do for you.
We should probably look at Lighten Up Francis's comments here as kind of a blessing, because now the left isn't just comparing Trump to Nazis. Now they're acknowledging that communists are killers too. I mean, this is you got to take your silver linings where you can find them. And so no longer content to blame the killings on Hitler, to associate Republicans with Nazis, which only gets you what, if you count the Holocaust, 10 million people maybe. Now they're lumping in actual communists who killed 8, 9, 10 times as many people. So that, I suppose, is our silver lining. That Republicans, that Donald Trump is as bad, not just as a Nazi, but also as those rat-fink communists as well. We'll take it.
And even though this professor is an emeritus, so he's not actually teaching, that's how Duke University is using the out. Because they can use all their bona fides to get onto CNN or to get onto any of these news sources and say, well, I am an expert in the field. I have a doctor's degree, so you have to listen to me. But then when they say absolutely asinine things like this, then the universities can go, wow, they're not actually teaching. The spokesman, Keith Lawrence, said in a statement to Campus Reform that Dr. Francis is retired and has no current teaching, clinical, or administrative responsibilities at Duke. Current and retired faculty, staff, and students at Duke have the right to share their personal views on the media, on social media, and in other public forums.
Yeah, because this guy just lost his mind by having retired a couple years ago.
Yeah.
And I have never met, you can tell me if it's different for you, but I have never met a psychiatrist who had an opinion on politics that wasn't batshit crazy.
I've never hung out with any psychiatrists.
I mean, whenever you see them in the news, they're opining about this stuff, or about this transgender stuff. They're just lunatics. I mean,
well, and they say that if you like psychology, psychiatry, all that, the more you study it, the more you self-diagnose.
Right.
So there's that to be.
Projection, Francis.
Oh, Francis.
And perhaps the most alarming aspect of the story is the fact that Brian Stelter just sat there. No challenge to this. I mean, can you imagine if on Fox News you had some psychiatrist come on and say that Barack Obama is responsible for more deaths than Hitler, Stalin, and Mao. And Chris Wallace just sort of sat there in his
yes.
George Costanza-like way and nodded.
All right, well, over in, I guess, Iowa, we have a professor who has said that I am Antifa. I am Antifa. Like, I am Spartacus, Cory Booker.
For the love of God, look at his picture.
I know. So anyway, the story is Jeff Klinsmann, that's his name. He was a Kirkwood Community College adjunct, English professor.
Oh, yeah.
One of your breed. Since 2010, he had told the local news in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, that, quote, I affirm that I am Antifa. He's a radical lefty who also wants to bash Trump with a baseball bat. So you know where he's going. And then on the Facebook page for Iowa Antifa, one can find just a litany. Like if you want to go down that rabbit hole, far left statements from this guy, conversations he's engaged with, and one of them actually features a tweet from President Donald Trump where he calls the group radical left whack jobs go around hitting people over the heads with baseball bats. And then this professor, who we'll get to in a minute about how he's not a professor there anymore, wrote, yeah, I know who I'd clock with a bat. So that's a threat to the president.
Well, take a look at Jeff Klinsmann's picture again. This is what Antifa has become. That's a blue pill taking, erectile dysfunction, post-menopausal male, right? That's the kind of guy that sits on porch swings and has 3 cats and digs in his garden for weeds. This is what Antifa has become. That's the face of Antifa on college campuses.
So over the years, Klinsmann's Facebook page has made tons of stuff about stopping evangelical Christians. He included this poem that said, kill them all and bury them deep in the ground. Okay. Klinsmann went on to explain that it's not pretty and I'm not proud, but seeing what evangelical Christians are doing to this, he said county, he might have meant country, and its people fills me with rage and a desire to exact revenge. Again, look at his photo. I understand.
And who? This is typical English professor where you can...
Iowa.
Research means you never actually have to prove anything. So God knows that Donald Trump is not an evangelical Christian. There are almost no evangelical Christians on his staff, especially now that Sarah Sanders is gone. There are no evangelicals on his staff. I suppose you could consider the vice president to some degree. But what do they do? What laws, what measures are being enacted in the names of evangelical Christianity that makes him want to kill them all and bury them deep?
Well,
it's not pretty, and I'm not proud. Well, no, it's not pretty, and you're very proud. You're a typical smug English professor who pretends like he's only saying this because he has to. There's nothing, you're the least bit unproud of that.
Yes, but he's no longer a professor because just within days after, basically a lot of buzz came out about this, about his free speech. Should he have been allowed to say this? Blah, blah, blah. He should be fired, all this stuff. He declined to comment, calling it, or Kirkwood, the college, declined to comment, calling it a personnel matter. But then Klinsmann just decided to resign. And the Kirkwood president, Lori Sundberg, announced in a message to the greater Kirkwood community. She said that school's leadership has been assessing this matter in recent days, especially its potential impact on our learning environment. With the safety of our students, faculty, and staff as our top concern, we made the decision this morning to identify an instructor who will take over the one course that Mr. Klinsmann would have taught this semester.
He was an adjunct. He wasn't tenured. He wasn't part of the full-time faculty.
Yes.
And I have no doubt that he resigned rather than formally being fired.
Yeah, that's
in case some other lunatic Iowa college wants to hire him. But where he got in trouble is free speech is free speech, as we've seen before. Mm-hmm. That idiot Duke professor emeritus has the right to say what he wants to say, especially because he's retired, because we believe in free speech. But here you have a situation where he's wishing violence, right? He wants to go up, take a bat upside the president's head. He wants to see evangelical Christians, and there's going to be some of them in Iowa, right? Murdered and buried deep. So his commentary went from being just abstract to promoting violence, and that's why the university parted ways with him. And the irony is, as if he was a tenured full professor, would have been a darn thing they could have done about it either.
Yeah, but they still did say that for that first couple days, or at least the first day of school, they were going to have up security a little bit, because once you incite violence, when you say you're going to take a baseball bat to the president's noggin, you got to question what's going to happen.
We're 2 stories in to Trump derangement college professor, right? And you can sort of see the lunacy of this. I mean, I used to think George Bush derangement was bad, but these guys, George Bush, he's beloved, right, compared to the way they talk about Donald Trump. They're longing for the days of a Bush presidency.
Exactly. Well, we also have, because Trump's to blame for everything, as we know, a professor wrote an article. It was an op-ed in The Atlantic back in May, and she's a biology professor, Luana Maroja of Williams College. She talked about how it's Trump's fault that her students were turned into biology deniers. And here's how she framed it. She has the op-ed called Self-Censorship on Campus is Bad for Science. She noticed that since the election of Donald Trump, way back in 2016, her students' zealous embrace of social justice ideology is increasingly resulting in this, quote, denialism when it comes to well-established biological ideas.
The biological idea, for instance, that there are two genders. These left-wing students are denying that. The fact that an unborn child is a living, breathing human being, the left is denying that. Certain aspects of global warming, which have been utterly debunked, these leftist zealot kids are denying that. And the irony about this is these are radical left-wing positions that kids are being taught to take in every university. And she blames their leftism not on left-wing professors, but on Donald Trump. Because we've got Donald Trump in the White House, these students have to deny biology.
Well, she found out that's what's happening.
Right.
It's not even what she's necessarily saying. So she said, okay, here's an example. She was doing a presentation on heritability, okay, the degree to which offspring genetically resemble their parents, both physically and in behavior. And she discussed IQ differences and the science behind the differences.
Ooh, that's dangerous.
Exactly.
Oh,
so within
boy.
the U.S. and her home country of Brazil, okay, so she's actually from Brazil. And she says then, quote, without any evidence, the students rejected the very notion of scientifically conducted IQ tests, declaring them to be bogus science and that they were invented to ostracize minority groups, and they refused to accept the well-established idea that IQ is partly influenced by genetics. So she, as a biology professor,
she's angry about that.
She's trying to just do her job.
Now, why is that Trump's problem?
She's saying it's because everything is Trump's fault. But it's ever since Trump was put into office, and it's because they're getting it from the other people.
But that's patently not true. Before 2016, this was going on in college campuses. They were already denying biology. They were already pushing the transgender agenda. They were already ignoring what evidence there was about climate science that didn't fit along with its paradigm. We had the Michael Mann scandal. We've got the East Anglia made-up information scandal. It's been going on for a long time. What bothers me is that a professor as thoughtful as this, one who wants to teach biology, one who wants to make biology a empirical science, as it should be based on fact. So she's upset, good for her, when her kids are handed facts and they deconstruct them according to what English professors like that couch-sitting moron we just showed you, right? Klinsmann. But my problem is that for her to default to say, whether she's blaming Trump or not, citing as the reason for this is absurd. Because this is a long history, well before Trump became on the scene.
But you have to cite Trump so that you can get your op-ed published in
or
the Atlantic.
Right.
Which is, I mean, she's playing the game. She understands this.
You got to the point much quicker than I did. That's
course.
exactly the point I was driving to, is that unless you blame Trump, no one's going to take it seriously. If you say this is a fault of lefty, which it is, if this is the fault of left-wing mindless professors, not only will it not get published, but you're going to be ostracized. If you can blame it on Donald Trump, all of a sudden, is it the Atlantic?
The Atlantic.
The Atlantic.
The Atlantic.
Rag. Nevertheless, but an important rag to lefties.
Yeah. And remember, you have the PhD and I don't. So moving on. We have Trump, who is also to blame because that makes an English, you English professor, it makes your job harder.
So biology professor upset about what Donald Trump has wrought with his students, and an English professor upset about how Donald Trump is forcing him to do something he's been doing for 20 years anyway. Give us the story, Katie.
All right, so David McGrath wrote an op-ed in the Cap Times, which is out of Madison, Wisconsin.
Madison, Wisconsin.
Yes, so he is an emeritus English professor at the College of DuPage down there in Illinois. He said that when he returns to the classroom in the fall, because he's doing some adjunct work, into the throes of the upcoming 2020 election, he will not be allowed to do any, quote, politicking because most states have laws prohibiting this by teachers at public colleges and universities. Okay.
Yeah, that's a guy, show his picture. That's a guy who's done no politicking over his 30-year academic career. He's not a guy who's used English classrooms as a way of undermining American culture, American values. No. He's never done that. And boy, what a shame. Because if he could adjust in his adjunct position now, use the classroom just this one time to undermine Donald Trump, and you and I know he's going to do it anyway.
So he says, and if I do the job I'm supposed to do, according to the official course description of Composition 101 and 102, would you like to explain what Composition 101 and 102?
These are the basic freshman English courses that everybody has to take. They're supposed to be writing courses, but they never are. They're not about writing at all. They're not about grammar. It's the reason your kids can't spell or read when they graduate college. It's not about grammar, spelling, syntax, or form. None of that stuff. What it's about now is writing essays about really, really woke topics to measure how much you agree with your professor.
Yes. He says, I will have to teach my students that nearly everything that President Donald Trump says and writes is wrong. That nearly everything he says and writes is antithetical to what they will learn about logic, argumentation, and communication.
Logic in a freshman English class. Yeah. It is to laugh. Logic in a freshman. You don't teach logic. I wish you did. If you're not going to teach anything but politics, give them a fundamental course in logic. Help them think. Argumentation. You are not learning how to argue. What you're learning is how to parrot progressive values, and communication means hectoring you into silence. And the disingenuousness of this is ridiculous. So now he's basically saying, right, because Donald Trump is an illiterate liar, I should spend my entire freshman English class pointing that out to a bunch of kids who can't read or write themselves.
Yes, he says that Trump has repeatedly violated the rules of logic in ways that have ruined his credibility, and on countless occasions he has falsified, omitted, or ignored evidence that underscores the truth. He cites Aristotle's principle of logic in his persuasive writing in Comp 101.
I can think of 24 ways that would have applied to Barack Obama, too. I could give you 24 ways that same argument applies to Barack Obama.
When I took Comp 101, back when I was at the University of Minnesota, many moons ago, and George W. Bush was still president, we had to watch Fahrenheit 9/11.
Not in your freshman English class.
In my freshman
exactly
English
right.
class.
And there you go. There's the ground stat.
Yep.
It's a documentary that doesn't document anything. It's a fake-umentary. Right? But we take, or how many freshman college kids have to watch An Inconvenient Truth? Right? Which how many documented lies?
English.
How many documented lies are there in that particular documentary? Mockumentary.
Which that might have been a sociology class I watched that one, but we did watch it. Too many things. All right. So this professor, if we want to call him that, thinks that when his students don't use a citation and he penalizes them for it, the student is going to invoke Trump. So now that the student has the out to invoke Trump.
Yeah.
Well, that's how the president's gotten away with it, so, I should too.
The average 19-year-old who's a first semester college kid
Totally
is going to start throwing Trump around to impress his professors. This guy, talk about, this is as bad as the psychiatrist, right? This is utter projection. I love this, right? He says, I am just one teacher who will be teaching 27 students in English composition next fall. Across the nation, there will be tens of thousands of composition teachers with hundreds of thousands of students, all required to learn the myriad ways that the President of the United States tries to conceal or slant through. He is actually convinced that the premise of this course is to expose Trump.
Yeah. That's basically, just so everyone's aware, I did look him up on the whole Rate My Professor, and his most recent reviews, one was actually from like 5 years ago, but that's the last time he got reviews. Some people said for his English 101, which is Comp 101, this guy needs to stick to teaching and stop preaching. Interjecting his irrational personal opinions into his coursework is a constant irritation. He often makes claims for which there is no factual evidence to support his emotional, irrational opinion. And he teaches how not to be a logical thinker.
Are you sure that the name of that poster on Rate My Professors was not Huge Hands?
Huge.
You sure it wasn't huge?
Huge. And the other one was decent teacher, just needs to keep his politics and personal opinions out of the course material.
Which we now know is impossible.
We're going to head down to UT Austin. What's an instructor saying down there?
And that can never be a good thing for logic and reason. UT Austin, where keeping it weird is tattooed on the forehead of every women's studies professor. Trump is a Nazi, the instructor says, and you are too if you still support him.
That's a t-shirt right there.
Trump is a Nazi, and turn around on the back, and you are too if you still support him. And I love the way that she gives you a little bit of a break. If you still support him. Means maybe if you voted for him in 2016, maybe you were just a junior Nazi. Part of the Hitler Jugend, right?
Jugend.
You hadn't been the Jugend. You haven't been fully invested in your Nazism. You were still wearing short pants, right, before you became a full brown shirt. But now, after 2 years of this, if you still support Donald Trump, you are a Nazi. You are, and I love this, entomology. That's bugs, right?
Bugs.
That's bugs to you and me. UT Austin entomology professor Alex Wilde thinks that Trump is a Nazi, and you are too if you still support him. He thought it smart to just tweet this little thought out after Trump announced he is considering labeling Antifa a terrorist organization. Now let's talk about logic here. Terrorists throw things. Terrorists disrupt things. Terrorists are violence. Terrorists engage in threats. Terrorists dock and scare and try to frighten people, bully them. They are anti-free speech. They show up at legal rallies to shut them down with violence. That is the walking, talking definition of a domestic terrorist group, and yet this is what provoked Professor Alex Wilde, right?
He's
the
wild.
Entomologist, to say that Donald Trump is a Nazi because he dares to call Antifa what it is.
Yeah, well, all of us are Nazis too if you support him in the least. If you say he's my president or he even is the president. And the thing is, Alex Wilde is one of those Twitter fiends, basically. He loves being on Twitter and going on these rants, because just a day prior, he wrote on Twitter that a few Republicans have been emailing me to claim they aren't Nazis. And he says, when they stand up to oppose the forced separation of children from their parents, I'll believe them. When they stand up to stop the solitary confinement and abuse of migrants without trial, I'll reconsider.
And again, where was this when Obama was doing all these things?
Until they stop the intentional use of torture and child abuse as part of their immigration policy, the decent people of the world are right to draw lines connecting Trumpists to Nazis. And then, this is how nice of Professor Wilde to advise any Republicans who email him to not include their personal contact information. He wrote, pro tip, if you're going to email me a string of insults, remember to purge your home address and phone number from your signature line because, in all quotes, why would you do that?
Because we're not a bunch of cowards like you. People who support Donald Trump are willing to write you back man to man, person to person, woman to woman, in this case, and simply point out that we disagree with you. Here's another way of looking at this. And your response to them is not to engage them in argument, but tacitly threaten to dox them. Don't send it to me, right? Don't send me something I can use against you. Don't send me something I can send over to my Antifa friend in Iowa sitting on his park bench so he can come and protest you.
Now, all of this is to say, because UT Austin has had issues with doxing before. The Autonomous Student Network threatened to dox any incoming conservative freshmen this fall who decide that they are going to join conservative student groups.
And we did a story about that months ago.
Yes,
we
we
talked
did.
about
So,
that, right?
and then the college Republicans had responded to what Alex Wilde is doing, since this, kind of now gets onto campus and includes them. They said to all his tweets, there's at least one person said, I think he's all just talk and chest thumping. A professor of bugs doesn't really strike fear into any campus conservative. Many other organizations try to dox anybody right of center anyways. And they referred to Wilde as just some dude who's full of hate, who's making himself look pathetic.
God, when you make an 18-year-old college kid sound that
School
smart.
Yeah.
Good Lord. I mean, that the level of maturity, even with all the dudes from the college kid, is just infinitely beyond what we can expect from the entomology department at the University of Texas, Austin.
And that's another one in the books. As always, please share this episode and subscribe to the free audio podcast on iTunes, SoundCloud, and everywhere else. Just visit drdukeshow.com, click on any of the platforms on the top of the screen, and subscribe for free.
And that's a wrap on another week. We'll be back again Monday at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. For Freedom Project, I'm Dr. Duke. She's Katie. And remember, stay educated, my friends.